We do live in an age of labels. In the political atmosphere, labels are thrown about just like snowballs in a big snowball fight in the winter. People want to label others as a whole, got the variety of things. I think the most common one now seems to be the term racist, whatever that may or may not mean to people. But we live in a time of labels. What does everyone, quotes, everyone in the Church of God want to be? If you want to be labeled, what would you label yourself? Well, I'm talking in the terms of, say, current church history, the last 20 or 25 years. The one that everybody wants to be labeled, it seems like, is the term Philadelphian. There are churches that call themselves Philadelphian. There are groups that say they are Philadelphian. Others are Laodicean. I've always thought it was very improper for us to use labels, trying to label other people. Paul said we are not to compare ourselves one among another. Those who do so are not wise. But the term Philadelphian label is used because people would like to think they're the ones who are going to a place of safety. Let's go over to Revelation chapter 3. Revelation chapter 3 is where this is promised. And I want to do some time, or spend some time today talking about the concept of God's protection as the tribulation and the 7 last plagues and the terrible things we know are going to happen approach. Revelation chapter 3, we have what everybody wants to be, which is a Philadelphian. Revelation chapter 3, let's begin in verse 7. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. So this is an unusual beginning concerning, when you compare it to the other 6 eras, because he's honestly saying something very positive about opening doors and having the key of David. David understood repentance clearly, as we understand from Psalm 51, and of course the key of David sitting on the throne of really the throne of Israel forever, having a son to rule on that throne, and having Jesus Christ return to it. We understand that concept also. Neither one of those may be intended here. Perhaps something else also was intended. Let's drop down a little bit farther to verse 10. Because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial which is to come upon the whole world, and to test those who dwell upon the earth. Now, this is a phrase that we can't just pass over quickly. Notice there's the command to persevere. There's the hour of trial, which is to come upon the whole earth. And the purpose of that trial is to test those who dwell on the earth. So we have this promise to the Philadelphian era that they would not have to suffer some of the events that come to the end. I will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world. Now, perhaps the best way to understand that is to go back to some of Isaiah's prophecies about the end-time tribulation and the 3.5 years that are prophesied about 9 different times in the Bible. But it's called the year of trial on the earth, which would be the last year. But it seems like pretty apparent that this time of protection will last 3.5 years. Many teach that only their group is going to be spared, and of course, many teach that it is going to be at a place called Petra. Now, I've got a little thing here today. We're going to see if this works. Okay. Now, I've got a few little slides I thought you might be interested in. This is the light. This is where Petra is located, right outside of Jordan. When we were there visiting a few years ago, we stayed up at the southern edge of the Dead Sea and then took rented a car and came down, and we're there at Petra. It's an interesting city to visit. How many have visited Petra? So this will be new or old, maybe just a handful. It is quite a place. Let me see if I can get this to work. Maybe I can't get it to work. That's not working. Okay. Maybe I'm too far away from the projector. Did that do it? No? Let me see. Plus and minus. It's the forward arrow, right? That still didn't work. You want to advance that for me there, Del? Gil, can you do that? Oh, there we go. There's a number of slides I put in here just so you would see where people think they want to go to be protected. I'm not saying it is or is not. We have no official position on it. There are a number of scriptures that would indicate hiding in the rock or God protecting us in a place like that. But after touring it, I'm not sure it's a place I would love to spend 3.5 years. Rock floors, no facilities, very, very hot in the summertime. Petra is also the Arab city called Batra, or Batre, an ancient city in the center of the Arab kingdom in Hellenistic and Roman times. It was carved out, they think, about 1200 BC, and then populated by people called the Nabateans, and later the Seleucids. Herod was considered to be a Nabatean king. As we continue, let me see if we can pop. I mean, that's the wrong one. Did we miss one? Let's go forward if we can. Go forward there. Oh. Somehow we're just toggling back and forth. Am I hitting the wrong button? Yeah, that worked. There we go. Some of these are very, very large, massive stone cliffs that have, I'm not sure how much time it would take. This is a treasury building, but it's called the treasury building, but it was probably more of a funeral home. There are steps on each side here carved into the rocks, and the two guys on each side are Castor and Pollux. And they were the two Greek gods. One took one guy, bad people to the bad place, one took good people to the good place. But there's not much inside. It is probably the most famous building there. Let's continue to go. There we go. There's a couple others. But this is at the entrance coming in on the left. It's not a very nice place for you to tell your family we're going to live. That's our new house. Want to go see it? No. This is some old Roman ruins at the far end. Petra is immensely large. If you haven't been there, it's like miles long and hundreds of these caves. It's incredible how big it is. But just to show you where one possible place might be, but there's up in these rocks here, there's just all sorts of cut-in caverns, and they say at one time it was the city of 30,000 people. What really intrigued me when I was there was the waterworks. They had about 30 different dams built on these little waterways, wadis coming down into Petra, and they would collect water during the rainy season. And even today, sometimes when there's a big rain, Petra floods. It flooded about a week after we were there, and actually it was a week before. And they actually had like 2 feet of water in the entranceway, so they closed it down for a while because it's a very popular tourist place. But in ancient times, they would dam up all these little lakes all around Petra during the rainy season, and then they had abundant agriculture, and they had plenty of water. They called it a city of baths or waters. So it was quite the place. This is the Roman entrance at the northern, that'd be kind of the western entrance of Petra, and then this is the narrow entrance when you go in from the main road, and this is the area that was several feet deep in water about a week before we were there. But you can see that, and this is fairly long. I'd say this is a good, maybe a quarter mile or more going through this narrow kind of rock defile on both sides to enter. And then these are some more of the temples and the buildings, the government buildings that they had built into the hillside. Okay, that's all I have for there. So we'll just talk about that. The Petra being a possibility of a place where God could protect his people. And we don't know exactly how that's going to work out, but we certainly hope that however we are accounted worthy to escape, that God will account that for us, and we'll be able to endure these last years that may be coming on us soon. We're not saying for sure. We don't set dates or predict, but any of us who have been around for more than a few years know that the world is in a great deal of problem right now, politically, financially, and otherwise. I want to go over now to Revelation chapter, well, let's just look at, we talked about persevering and the Word of God's patience. Let's go to chapter 14 now, beginning in verse 6. Revelation chapter 14, beginning in verse 6. He says here, I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth. That's the gospel that's been preached from the very beginning, from the time of Seth on down through history. To every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made heaven and earth and the sea and springs of water. And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So this time setting is in the period of Babylon falling, the second Babylon, what some are now calling the Great World Government, perhaps this term called the Great Reset, will resolve itself in being the new Babylon. We'll just have to wait and see. Then a third angel followed and said with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation." So the conclusion from Revelation 14 and also chapter 13 is that people at the end time who are alive will either have the mark of the beast or the mark or the sign of God. That's the only choice you have. You will either be aligned with one or with the other. He himself shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation, and shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb, meaning that when Christ returns in that great battle that takes place at Jerusalem, north of Jerusalem, and of course it's going to be a time of great destruction and a lot of death for the armies of the earth who come against Christ. Verse 12 says, "Here's the patience of the saints." Remember, Revelation 3 talked about we have kept the word of God's patience. So how do we keep the word of God's patience and therefore at least qualify or take that first step towards qualifying to being protected at a time when the world is in great destruction and turmoil? Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. It is the commandments of God that Satan hates and tries to destroy at every step of the way. We've seen some of that illustrated this past week with some of the turmoil that was, I think, intentionally caused and planned by those who revealed what may be or may not be a coming Supreme Court decision. But those who are arguing against life and have the arrogance of themselves, the choice to murder innocent children, amazing how the reaction has been. Did you ever ask yourself why abortion is so important to socialism and to those who are God haters, essentially? Why is it the most important thing in their life, the key thing they must do? Anyone know? Ever heard of Karl Marx? How about Vladimir Lenin? More recent times, Joseph Stalin. What did all three of them say? Inconvenient people can be removed by the state. All three of them said in their own words, Lenin said it very plainly, that we have the right to remove people who are inconvenient to the state. And so 99.999% of all babies who are murdered before being born are murdered because of convenience. It's not convenient for the mother or other people perhaps involved in her life. So abortion is stating that they have the right to murder inconvenient people. That's what it is. But what does God say? God says they are my children whom you bore unto me. You don't even own your own children. You think you do, just ask them when they turn 18. No, we bore them or bear them unto God, and we have a short time to teach them God's ways, and then we turn them over and hope that we've taught them well and that they can be guided. But that is why abortion is so important, because it says that man is God, not God is God. And men, then, if they are the supreme authority, as they believe they are, and then they form governments, which they call the state, which they call an even more supreme authority, then they have the right to eliminate people who are, quote, not convenient. If you'd like some illustration of that, I suggest you read The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn and several other books along that line. So here we have people who hate the commandments of God, but in the end time, those who have the patience that's going to endure them through this time are those who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus Christ. Let's also go back to Romans chapter 2, beginning in verse 5. Romans chapter 2. Romans chapter 2 follows chapter 1, which we all know very well is about the process of the decay of mankind and how evil eventually becomes something that God turns man over to when they are so determined to do evil. He turns them over to just to let them do it and to have their minds become completely depraved. That's the type of world that he has to come back and change, has to come back and rescue. Romans chapter 2 and verse 5, in accordance with the hardness and impudent heart, you are treasuring up for yourself wrath in the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of God. So that's what we are looking forward to. Things are not falling apart. Things are coming together as God intends. God never is late. God is never early. God does things on time according to his schedule. But those who are in defiance of God and his commandments are treasuring up for themselves wrath in the day of wrath. God's people who are keeping his commandments and sincerely following him are treasuring up for themselves life, but also protection promised by God in this day of the revelation of the righteous judgment of God. That's what the world needs right now, is the righteous judgment of God. Who will render to each one according to his deeds, eternal life to those who by patient continuance in doing good. Remember the word of patience mentioned in Revelation chapter 3 to Philadelphia and repeated again in Revelation 14. Eternal life to those who by patient continuance in doing good seek for glory, honor, and immortality. So our goal between now and when Christ returns is to be patiently and continually doing what is right, doing good, seeking for God's glory in his honor and for immortality. But to those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, God's indignation and wrath is coming. Tribulation and anguish on every soul of man who does evil, of the Jew first and also of the Greek. But glory, honor, and peace to everyone who works what is good, to the Jew first and also to the Greek, for there is no partiality with God, not with regards to birth or circumstances of birth or lineage, but with regards to their character and their behavior. Here we have verse 11 then, there's no partiality with God, because God is only partial concerning your Christian character, whether or not you are obeying him or not. Now I want to go back to the book of Ezekiel chapter 1, and I want to review a couple of things here that need explaining. In the time when the Jews had their temple destroyed and were in exile, this part of Ezekiel is written before that final destruction, but after the original of three, the first of three, defeats of the Jews in Jerusalem, and there were three groups of captives taken back. Ezekiel was among the first in about the year 608 BC. But Ezekiel is by the river Kibar. That's why I've got a little map here. You can see just how close it is to Syria. Damascus is down here, Jerusalem down here, but the river Kibar is a little tributary off of the Euphrates River. And that's where Ezekiel was with quite a number of the captives. But it shows you that it was fairly close to where they could just go to the north, up between the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and of course the Black Sea, and head up into Europe through that little neck of land fairly easily when it was time to go. But here we have in Ezekiel chapter 1. The entire chapter is a vision of the throne of God. Why is this in here? Why did the rest of Ezekiel just says the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel? Well, actually, there are 4 places where he sees this. But most of the time, just the book of Ezekiel, which, by the way, has more phrases the word of the Lord came to than all the rest of the Bible put together. But why is this vision in here? We've all read this vision, right? I think I've got a picture here. Another one, yeah, there we go. I've had a couple artist renditions. If you read through this chapter, which we'll skim, trying to do a drawing, do that sometime, just read through it and try to draw this out like you're an artist. It's very, very difficult. All of the renditions online are all over the map. You can just see all sorts of various things. But that doesn't answer the question, is why did Ezekiel even have the vision? Well, it bears some thought and some historical understanding. Because at the time they lived, they thought gods lived in that land. They thought the god of Assyria lived up in Assyria. They thought the god of the Phoenicians lived where the Phoenicians lived. And there were some who thought the God of Israel lived only in the temple in Jerusalem. And at this point, it was still there, the Shekinah glory, or at least the presence of God. It actually leaves in Ezekiel chapter 9. But this was a way for God to tell Ezekiel, to tell the people in exile, look, I am not limited by a temple in one location. That God is literally everywhere. And just like in the book of Acts chapter 2, when the glory of God appeared on the heads of the men who were there, and what did the apostles say? They said, God has shown us that he does not live in buildings made with hands. and it got Stephen stoned for saying those very true, accurate, and correct words. But he wasn't the first person to get stoned or killed for telling the truth, and he won't be the last. But the book of Ezekiel begins with this very detailed vision, because God is telling the Jews, I am everywhere, and my throne can take me anywhere I want my throne to go. So don't feel like I am inaccessible because you are in Babylon, or because you've been taking 600 miles across the desert into a place of captivity. Chapter 1, verse 1 says, it came to pass in the 30th year, that's the 30th year of Ezekiel's life. Just like John the Baptist began his ministry in his 30th year, Jesus Christ began his ministry in his 30th year, Ezekiel also did. In the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th day of the month, which is on the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's captivity, so about 603 BC, this would be in the neighborhood of around 20 years before Jerusalem is finally destroyed. The word of the Lord came expressly to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was upon him there. So in this case, he's kind of writing in third person, but he's describing what he saw. I looked, and behold, a whirlwind was coming out of the north, a great cloud with raging and fire engulfing itself, and brightness was all around it, and radiating out of its midst like the color of amber in the midst of the fire. So we have this fire going in a whirlwind. If you've seen tornadoes or a whirlwind, most of the time they're just dust and dirt and clouds, but in this case, the radiating fire of God is a whirlwind. It's kind of going in circles. And that's the first thing in this cloud of raging fire, the first thing that Ezekiel sees. From within it came the likeness of 4 living creatures. So then he began to see these 4 creatures that appeared. And this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, but each had 4 faces, and each one had 4 wings. So each one has 4 faces and then 4 wings. And 2 of the wings are up and 2 of the wings are down. We'll see the legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like calves' feet. So they were solid, maybe hoof-looking type things. They sparkled like the color of burnished bronze. So bronze burnished in a fire, it's like green and orange and all sorts of colors coming out. The hands of a man were under their wings on their 4 sides, and each of the 4 had faces and wings. So these are going to be really difficult to try to figure out what they look like. You can see what they've got here. This artist's rendition has the wings, and they have these wheels that are up on top, although I think the wheels are better, more accurately, to be on the bottom. But let's see, this picture here I thought might be at least the best way to see this sea of glass that is above the wheels and above these wings. You can see these hooves coming down, look like calves' hooves, but above that is the throne with the rainbow over it. Every time I read this, it makes me very upset that the rainbow, which is above God's throne, has been appropriated by a system of evil and perversion, something that God hates. But God is the author of the rainbow, and it does remind us of his throne and his wonderful covenant he's made with mankind not to destroy the earth again with water. Let's continue. Verse 8, the hands of a man were under their wings on their 4 sides, so the wings are there, and then there's also hands coming out. The wings touched one another. The creatures did not turn when they went, but each one went straight forward. So it's 4 sides. If it wants to go this direction, it just goes. The throne platform here, the transport of God's throne, does not rotate or turn. Now the fire under it rotates, but the throne itself, the sea of glass, does not. As for the likeness of their faces, each one had the face of a man. The 4 had the face of a lion on the right side. The 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. Each of the 4 had the face of an eagle. Thus were their faces, their wings outstretched upward. 2 wings of each one touched one another, and 2 covered their bodies. So their upper wings touched each other, probably supported the sea of glass and the throne, and the others went down. Each one went straight forward when they went wherever the Spirit wanted to go, and they did not turn as they went. So Ezekiel tells us several times that this throne is mobile, and it is not planted in one place like the temple in Jerusalem, but tells us that God goes everywhere and goes anywhere he wants to go. Verse 13, as for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches going back and forth among the living creatures. So we have this cascading fire, this coruscating lights of various colors that are all around and below the throne of God and above the living creatures, and below apparently the sea of glass, or the sea of glowing, what he calls sapphire, which is kind of a light bluish green that is beneath the throne of God. The same sea of glass, by the way, is pictured in Revelation chapter 14, when those who have come out of the Great Tribulation are standing on it, holding, dressed in white and holding their sheaves. So we have this sea of glass, which symbolizes obviously God's presence and the platform that God's throne is carried about on. Then verse 15, I looked at the living creatures. Behold, a wheel was on the earth besides each living creature with its 4 faces. Now, this is the part that gets really difficult to try to draw. Where are these wheels? Exactly how do they fit? It just says what it says. A wheel was on the earth besides each living creature with its 4 faces. The appearance of the wheels and their workings was like the color of beryl, and all 4 had the same likeness. The appearance of their workings was, as it were, in the middle of a wheel. Now, it gets even more complicated because it says there were eyes on the rims of these wheels. Verse 18, as for their rims, they were so high they were awesome, and their rims were full of eyes all around the 4 of them. So this gets to be something that we almost can't visualize. It would be very difficult to draw. If you go on the internet sometime, look at Ezekiel 1 vision, then look at images or some sort of drawings, and there are just hundreds of them, and no 2 are alike. So it is a very challenging thing. Someday we'll be able to see it, hopefully, and understand it a little bit better. But the purpose here isn't to give Ezekiel a detailed picture. He saw it in vision, but the purpose here is to let the people in captivity know that God was still close. He was still with them. He hadn't left them. And I think it's an important lesson for us, because as this unfolds, we find that there's a very terrible prophecy about the destruction of Israel and Jerusalem and what happens to them being divided in thirds. And they needed to understand that God was not abandoning them. He was still available to them. Verse 20, wherever the Spirit wanted to go, they went, because there the Spirit went. And the wheels were lifted together with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. So the Spirit, essentially he's talking about God. Wherever God wanted to go, they went that direction that he basically said. Verse 21, when these went, these went, or when those went, these went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up together with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. So he's just saying this unit stayed together. It didn't fall apart no matter what direction it went, no matter how fast it stayed together. The likeness of the firmament above the heads of the living creatures was like the color of the awesome crystal stretched out over their heads. This is the sea of glass mentioned in Revelation 14. And so you can see it sort of pictured here under the throne. Be nice to actually see a more detailed, accurate picture of it, but at least this tells us that this author tried to do the very best he could in making that picture. Verse 24, as they went, I heard the noise of their wings, like the noise of many waters. That is an important thing to understand. When you hear the phrase, the sound of many waters in the Bible, it means God is close. They can't see the throne, they can't see this transportation system, but when it says the sound of many waters, which it does a number of places in scriptures, that sound comes from those wings that are under the throne of God. And so it's important to understand that when you read those places where the sound of many waters or the voice of many waters is mentioned. Verse 25, a voice came from above the firmament that was over their heads. Whenever they stood, they let down their wings. And above the firmament over their heads was a likeness of a throne. God's throne, where he sits, is mentioned many times in Scripture. In Daniel, it tells us that the throne came and God was seated, and then a kingdom was given to his son, who then comes to the earth. I'm summarizing there in Daniel chapter 2 and chapter 7, not chapter 9, but that's essentially what it says. In appearance like a sapphire stone, on the likeness of the throne was a likeness with the appearance of a man high above it. We are made in the image of God. And so when God is pictured here in vision, and Ezekiel actually sees in vision God on his throne, God looks like a man, because we are made in the image of God. And Ezekiel recognized it as the likeness of a man. From the appearance of his waist upward, I saw, and as it were, the color of amber with the appearance of fire all around within it. Well, it's the outline and the appearance of a man, but it still glows with fire, just like the picture of Jesus Christ resurrected, not only in the Transfiguration, but also in Revelation chapter 1. But we have the appearance of a man, but he has a glow and a fiery appearance all around within it, and from the appearance of his waist downward I saw, as it were, the appearance of fire with brightness all around. So we have this brightness and this glowing, but it is the shape of a man. Like the appearance of a rainbow on a cloud on a rainy day, so was the appearance of the brightness over it, or on top of it, all around it. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God. So Ezekiel sees this incredible vision tell us that God's presence is not limited to the temple in Jerusalem. It's interesting that this is sort of a parallel concept being taught in the book of Hebrews, because here, as the temple was going to be destroyed and leveled within about 20 years, King Nebuchadnezzar gave the order that the entire city was to be leveled, but especially the temple. Josephus gives us a pretty detailed account of that. But also in the book of Hebrews, what does it say at chapter 13? We have no enduring city, but we are to go out of the city. Because the Jews in Jerusalem and some of the Christians there felt that without that temple, religion could not be carried out. But Paul told them, we have no enduring city here. We have an enduring city, the heavenly Jerusalem. And so the destruction of Jerusalem would have no effect upon the religion of following God and the truth of living according to his scriptures. Just like it was going to have no effect whatsoever on the people living in captivity, they could still have a relationship with God when Jerusalem would be destroyed in 586 BC. So we have a parallel message to the people here in the time of Ezekiel, 603 or so BC, and the New Testament church, which is given to us kind of in a real window over there of 68, 69 BC or AD in the book of Hebrews, and also some lessons for our time. Because no matter where we are scattered to, God has not left us. He's not confined to some place where we can't find him. He can be very close no matter where we are when we seek him. I want to go over to chapter 3 just briefly. Chapter 3 here is about God dealing with his messengers. Chapter 2 contains 10 lamentations about the book of Ezekiel, much like the description of ancient Egypt, you might say. It was a scroll that was a scroll of a book. In fact, I think we have time. Let's look at that. Let's look at chapter 2 and verse 9. Or let's start in verse 8. But you, son of man, hear what I say to you. Do not be rebellious like the rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. So Ezekiel has to eat this book that God gives him, just like later the Apostle John would have to in the book of Revelation. I looked out, and there was a hand stretched out to me, and behold, a scroll of a book was in it. Now, I'm not sure who's ever tried to eat paper. I assume it's not very tasty. My wife would say that unleavened bread tastes the same, but at least why it's matzos. But a few years ago, we had a young man to our potluck during the last day of unleavened bread that brought a bunch of pieces of cut up cardboard and labeled it gluten-free unleavened bread. So remember that, Tony did that. So, and he put it out on the buffet line. I don't think anybody ate it, but it was, funny, made the point. So here he has this book he's supposed to read. He spread it out before me, verse 10, and there was writing on the inside and on the outside. So both the front of the scroll and the back of the scroll had writing on it. And in it were lamentations and mourning and woe. And he said to me, Son of man, eat what you find, eat this scroll, and go and speak to the house of Israel. So the message on this scroll was to be internalized. Is that a good word? To be eaten. Maybe he had to memorize it. Perhaps symbolically eating it meant that he had the message within him that he would then bring to the people of Israel. I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat the scroll. And he said, Son of man, feed your belly and fill your stomach with this scroll that I give you. So I ate it, and in my mouth it was like honey in sweetness. Now hold your place here. Let's go back to Revelation 10, because this occurs again, will occur again, as John is mentioned here. He gives the account. Revelation chapter 10, verse 1 says, I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and with a rainbow was on his head. And the rainbow covers God's throne. The cloud goes around God's throne when he doesn't want people to see it. His face was like the sun, his feet like pillars of fire, just like we have seen the vision in Ezekiel 1. He had a little book open in his hand, then he set his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land, and he cried with a loud voice, as when a lion roars, and he cried out, 7 thunders uttered their voices. And when the 7 thunders uttered their voices, I was about to write. John was going to write down what these 7 thunders said, but I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, seal up the things which the 7 thunders uttered, and do not write them. The angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised up his hand to heaven, just like the angel in Daniel chapter 12, and swore to him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that are in it, the earth and the things that are in it, the sea and the things that are in it, that there should be delay no longer. Now, when there is delay no longer, what happens? Let's go down to verse 9. So the angel said, or I went to the angel and said to him, give me the little book. And he said to me, take and eat it, and I will make your stomach bitter, but it will be sweet as honey in your mouth. So I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it, and it was sweet as honey in my mouth. But when I had eaten it, my stomach became bitter. And he said, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. Let's go back to Ezekiel 3, because the same message, the same purpose for eating the scroll or eating the book was given to Ezekiel. Verse 4 of Ezekiel chapter 3, he said to me, son of man, go to the house of Israel and speak with my words to them. Now, he was living in Babylon with Judean captives, but the Israelite captives who had been taken captive by Assyria about 150 years earlier were just to the north and to the west. So it wouldn't be all that far for him to go. We don't know exactly how his message got to them, but God did not say this is for the house of Judah only. He said this is for the house of Israel. You are not sent to a people of unfamiliar speech and of hard language, but to the house of Israel. So he knew who he was being sent to. Not to many people of unfamiliar speech and of hard language, those words you could not understand. Surely had I sent you to them, they would have listened to you. So if I would have sent you to a foreign nation, they would listen. But the house of Israel will not listen to you, because they will not listen to me. For all the house of Israel are impudent and hard-hearted. And certainly that is coming true very much in our time. My wife was reading this morning in an article that church attendance in Canada now is 13%. 13% of Canadians attend church each week. So it's less than the United States number, but I would assume that the number is 13% or less in Australia, New Zealand, and also in the UK, of those who would attend a Christian church anyway. So let's continue on down. We have the people of Israel who have turned against God, forgotten him. But verse 80 says, behold, I have made your face strong against their faces, and your forehead strong against their foreheads. So he was to give this message out in a matter of strength. God says his ministers are to be flames of fire, as he told Elijah. Like adamant stone, harder than flint, I have made your forehead. Do not be afraid of them. Do not be dismayed at their looks, though they are a rebellious house. So we're not to be afraid of them. Moreover, he said to me, son of man, receive into your heart all of my words, that I may speak to you and hear with your ears. So Ezekiel had his responsibility to understand and to really comprehend, and with all of his heart to embrace all of God's words. Then go get to the captives, to the children of your people, and speak to them and tell them, thus says the Lord, whether they hear or whether they refuse. So then the Spirit lifted me up, and I heard behind me a great thunderous voice saying, "Blessed is the glory of the Lord from his place." Not just from the temple, but from his place, meaning his throne, which is movable, which can go wherever he wants it to go. I also heard the noise of the wings of the living creatures, and that touched one another, and the noise of the wheels beside them, and it was a great thunderous noise. And the Spirit lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness in the heart of my spirit, but the hand of the Lord was strong upon me. And then I came to the captives at Tel Aviv, which of course modern-day Tel Aviv is named after, who dwelt by the river Kibar, and I sat where they sat and remained there astonished among them for 7 days. The rest of the chapter, as you're very familiar with, gives Ezekiel's story that he has been set up as a watchman, that he is now a watchman to the house of Israel. Now, chapter 4 is the beginning of 25 different pantomimes. Ezekiel acted out the messages that God gave him. Each one of his pantomimes or acting out were to be a warning or a lesson for the people of Israel. They wouldn't just say that you hear that Ezekiel was up there on the wall talking about how the wall was going to be torn down and we had to escape. No, they would say, no, Ezekiel tore a hole in the wall, put on a backpack, and went back and forth through this hole all night long. And that was to be a lesson for the people of Israel. Just like he had to lay on his side for 390 days on one side and 40 on the other. And in chapter 4 and verse 5, it says, I have you laid on, because of the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390, so you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. And verse 6 says, the house of Judah, 40 days I have you laid on your side each day for a year. So Ezekiel's a lot of these pantomimes. It's a very interesting book to read and to study his life, because all the ways that God had him act out the messages that he was to take to the people of Israel. But I want to focus on chapter 5, because we may be on the verge of this being fulfilled in the times in which we live. Certainly we are fulfilling the earlier part of the book, where Israel has turned against God, where they will not hear, where they refuse to hear the truth of God. If you look at the latest Beyond the Day magazine, the personal by Scott Ashley, who I went to college with, he and I were the two of the three youngest freshmen at Ambassador College that year. Mr. Ashley mentions how our response on the internet has gone down to about half of what it used to be, because search engines and social media sites are censoring and keeping us from being liked or being shared or being found on search engines. So our message is not one that the oligarchs of the tech industry appreciate, apparently. So we will keep putting it out no matter what, but the response may be reduced because the platform has been edited in that way. So we know that we are turning as a nation against God. The people of Israel are refusing to listen, and even when the message gets to them, they simply reject it. So the result is chapter 5, Son of man, take a sharp sword and take a barber's razor and pass it over your head and your beard, and take scales to weigh and divide the hair. So this is proof that Ezekiel didn't look like Ken Laux or me or some of the other people that would be in the room. He had a head of hair and he had a big beard, so he was able to shave entirely. And he was to divide it. It was enough hair to weigh and then put in 3 separate equal sizes or equal weights of hair. It says, you shall then divide the hair. You shall burn with fire 1/3 in the midst of the city. He had set up on the ground this tile representing Jerusalem. And 1/3 of the hair was to be burned in the middle of that city. When the days of the siege are finished, and you shall take 1/3 and strike it around with a sword. So put one pile on the ground, take a sword, and start cutting it up in pieces, smashing it. And 1/3 you shall scatter in the wind. So 1/3 was to be thrown up in the air and allowed to blow in the wind. And I will draw out a sword after them. You shall also take a number of them and bind them in the edge of your garment. So a small number was to be bound in the edge of your garment. Now, these are the people of the physical nations of Israel, showing that God is going to save, is going to spare some of them, because they will have to be relocated in their homeland and be the seed to begin rebuilding the nation of Israel during the millennium. So he's going to save a number of physical Israelites. We assume the number is about 10% from a number of other scriptures that indicate that. He will also protect his spiritual church as we are promised. So here we have this 1/3 that is drawn out with the sword after them, and then a portion of those are kept in Ezekiel's his garment or hem, which would symbolize God's protection. Then take some of them again and throw them in the midst of the fire and burn them in the fire. From there a fire will go out into all the house of Israel. For those who say this is only about Jerusalem, they have to read this verse because this says it is for all the house of Israel. Thus says the Lord God, this is Jerusalem, and I have set her in the midst of the nations and the countries all around her. This fire that's going to start in Jerusalem symbolically will go out to all of Israel, and in fact out to all the earth. She has rebelled against my judgments by doing wickedness more than the nations, against my statutes more than all the countries that are all around her, for they have refused my judgments and they have not walked in my statutes. And so this judgment that God is going to give is going to be very severe, and it will come upon our nation and the modern nations of Israel as really a big surprise, as like a whirlwind. The next section tells us something about what we need to make sure we understand. Let's go to chapter 9. In chapter 9, God's patience is done. It's like one of the Psalms says, you thought that because I didn't punish you immediately, that I was one like you. No, God will not always be patient. There comes a place where he understands that mankind has become incorrigible. Just like in the days of Noah, every thought of man was only wicked continually. So in Ezekiel chapter 9, right before the final punishment, final destruction of Jerusalem is given, verse 1 says, he called me out of the hearing with a loud voice, or in my hearing with a loud voice, saying, let those who have charge over the city draw near, each one with a deadly weapon in his hand. So there was a group of angels, of God's agents, who are in charge of the city of Jerusalem. And now they were to come with their swords drawn. And suddenly 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north. That's the one that faces Mount Scopus. And with a battle axe in his hand, and one man among them was clothed with linen, and had a writer's inkhorn at his side. And they went in and stood beside the bronze altar. So they came into the courtyard of the temple in Jerusalem, and they stood beside that huge bronze altar that was out in front, when it was full of all the things where they were able then to give sacrifices. Now the glory of the God of Israel had gone up from the cherub where it had been to the threshold of the temple. And he talked to the man clothed with linen who had the writer's inkhorn at his side. So this glory of God, picturing the presence of God, just like it did when Ezekiel saw it, the sea of glass, this shining glow, was now leaving the temple. It had come out to the threshold or the bottom of the door coming out of the temple. So it symbolized God's protection and God's presence leaving Jerusalem. And the man said, he called to the man clothed with linen who had the writer's inkhorn in his side. So one of these angels of God that came had a writer's inkhorn. And he said, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations who are done within it. It's an important lesson. We need to sigh and cry over the abominations in the land, over the babies who are murdered, over the people who suffer, the crime victims and those who suffer in so many ways because of evil predominating. We don't smile and say they got what they deserved, or we're glad about it, or gloat about it. If we truly love all mankind, as Jesus Christ did, as the Father did, he gave his only begotten Son for all the world, we need to make sure that we also have a certain amount of godly love and concern for all of society that is going to suffer so terribly, and hopefully we will have a part in being able to teach them God's way of life and restore them to the knowledge and the behavior that results in blessings, results in health, results in happiness. There are those religions who really like to condemn the rest of the world and point the finger and say, oh, isn't it wonderful that they're going to suffer? It's not godly. It's not from God. He says, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads. Remember where in Revelation we have the name of God on our foreheads, a number of places promised? Put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations that are done in it. And to the others he said in my hearing, go after him through the city and kill. Do not let your eye spare or have pity. Utterly slay the old and the young, the maidens, the little children and women. Do not come near anyone who has the mark. So this mark is a mark of protection. It's a mark of protection of those who fear God. You might say it's the same mark that will be on those who are protected at the end time in a place of safety, whether it's a place with rock or whatever, however God has it to work out for us. So we have this account, and it is one that we simply cannot forget. Notice that they begin in Jerusalem, and they begin at the temple. So utterly slay, verse 6, utterly slay the young men, maid, little children, but begin at my sanctuary. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 17, because God tells us that judgment begins at the house of God. And so this inkhorn that this angel is using in Jerusalem in vision here, and marks those who are going to be protected by God at that time, perhaps is simply a forerunner, a type of what's going to be happening in the times in which we live, and in fact, the times that those who have followed God and previous to us have already lived. 1 Peter 4 and verse 17, for the time has come for judgment to begin at the house of God. We are being judged now. Every day that we wake up, we are standing before the judgment seat of Christ to receive what has been good, either good or bad, what we've done according to his standards. Judgment is to begin at the house of God. If it begins with us, what will be the end of those who did not obey the gospel? So we live in a time when the world is not obeying the gospel, and the judgment and the suffering is going to be significant. Verse 18 says, now if the righteous one is scarcely saved, just like those who were in Jerusalem and when it was taken and destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, only a few were scarcely saved because Nebuzaradan allowed Jeremiah and many who worked with him, who supported him, to be spared and taken back either to Babylon or freed. So if the righteous are scarcely saved, where will the ungodly and the sinner appear? Therefore, let those who suffer according to the will of God commit their souls to him in doing good, as to a faithful Creator. We aren't yet to the place where those who are doing the will of God are suffering, but it seems like that may be on the horizon. Certainly there are some applications of that already in place. But it says simply the answer is to commit your souls to him in doing good as to a faithful Creator. So what is the seal of God that we want? Let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 2. Because you're going to have a seal on your forehead one way or the other. It's either going to be the mark of the beast, or it's going to be just like this rider with the inkhorn in Ezekiel chapter 9, it's going to be the seal of God. So which seal do you choose? Because you have a choice. 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 19, nevertheless, the solid foundation of God stands. The truth of God that's been taught since creation. The gospel of the kingdom of God, taught by Enoch, taught all down through time, still stands. Having this seal, the Lord knows those who are his, and let everyone who names the name of Christ depart from iniquity. So the sign of God that symbolizes God's protection is that you know God's voice. Jesus Christ said, my sheep know my voice, and they will not follow the voice of another. The Lord knows everyone who are his through his Spirit, and they answer his voice. And secondly, they depart from iniquity, or they depart from sin, the sin that permeates the world and the society in which we live. So do you have the seal of God?